So, do you want to know what Cafe's true agenda is? Because I'd be happy to tell you. We are the organization that supports both he for she and she for he. We are the organization that believes that the very idea of a gender war is toxic. We are the organization that believes that equality means equality for everyone. In this video series, I'm going to attempt to sketch out the big picture, without spending too much time on the details. The goal here is to clearly and thoroughly represent Cafe's approach to gender issues and gender relations so that there is no confusion. As you will see, Cafe does subscribe to a particular paradigm, but in order to perceive it, it is essential to have a clear grasp of at least one alternative paradigm. The alternative is important for contrast, comparison, and historical context. In this introductory video, I'll give you a taste of Cafe's official position with respect to feminism and men's rights. In part 2, I will supply the context. That is, I'll clearly identify the narrative and the set of ideas that we find ourselves politically and culturally immersed in today. And with the help of a particularly potent example, I will illustrate both the logical consistency and the political influence of this ideology. In part 3, I will provide a thorough explanation for the unique way that Cafe approaches gender relations, drawing on some key concepts from biology, psychology, and economics. So what is Cafe's position? What does Cafe stand for? What does Cafe believe in? Answers to these questions can easily be found on our website, in our Statement of Values, and in our FAQ section. From our Statement of Values, Cafe values the human rights of each and every individual. We believe that men and boys share a common collective interest with women and girls. We believe that through promoting the health and welfare of any individual, all will benefit. Cafe values public policy that flows from fact-led and evidence-based research. Political, ideological, or special interest commitments should not be allowed to undermine the broader public interest. Cafe values all fundamental freedoms, including freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of thought, freedom of association, and freedom of the press. We encourage the respectful exchange of ideas in order to foster greater understanding. And from the Q&A section, is Cafe a men's rights group? Cafe is a human rights group that advocates for equality of all members of society. Our focus is currently on men and boys because that issue receives much less attention than equal rights for women. We do not consider ourselves a men's rights group because discrimination against men also adversely affects many women, including their daughters, mothers, sisters, partners, and friends of male victims. Inequality can affect anybody and should be everybody's concern. Are you anti-feminist? Cafe supports equal rights for people of all sexes and genders, and actively opposes both misandry and misogyny in all their forms. We are not anti-feminist. Besides the fact that feminists themselves often disagree on the definition and scope of feminism, we find that generic labels such as feminist and men's rights groups are too limiting for conducting a productive social conversation about equality and justice. What are your goals? Our goal is to facilitate an inclusive, rational, and civilized public conversation about the status of boys and men in Canada. Topics we think should be discussed include mental and physical health, suicide, family law, education, public policy, workplace safety, media and cultural stereotypes, and misandry. We believe this conversation must be based on facts and evidence-based research, and not on ideology. Example, gender profiling that assumes that only women can be victims, and only men can be perpetrators of abuse and discrimination. We do not believe that equal rights is a zero-sum game, and we reject the notion that identifying and eliminating discrimination against men and boys will somehow increase discrimination against women and girls. by definition, equal rights means equal rights for everyone. So that's CAFE's position. And in this video series, I'm going to clarify and defend that position. But before I can do that, I must provide adequate context, because in order to grasp the significance of this perspective and the opposition to it, one also needs to understand the alternative view, the politically and culturally dominant view, the supposed consensus view, the view that we are immersed in right now. Feminism has earned a reputation amongst anti-feminists for being inconsistent, illogical, and contradictory. It's not hard to see why. This is confusing territory, especially given that amongst feminists who largely agree on what their goals should be and what the problems are, you'll still find a lot of infighting about strategy and priorities, and it's easy to find examples of apparent hypocrisy. How can you smash the patriarchy without also depending on the patriarchy or promoting the patriarchy to some degree? In addition to that, feminism is just a word, after all, and words can mean different things to different people. As Emma Watson says,
"It is not the word that is important. It's the idea and the ambition behind it."
I have to say, I agree with Emma Watson on that point. Furthermore, feminist is just a label, and regardless of what they believe, people have the freedom to identify themselves with that label or not. Nobody is born a feminist, and a feminist is not really a kind of person. That doesn't mean that words and labels like feminism or feminist are meaningless or useless, but for our purposes, they're too confusing, distracting, and divisive to be of much use. In part 2, I'm going to show you an ideology which is actually very logical and coherent. I will inspect it with a fine-tooth comb, dissect it, pull it apart, and explore its inner workings, as well as its many manifestations. Why just one example? Because this example is particularly illuminating, as well as original and influential. Just as with branches on the tree of life, ideologies, religions, languages, and artistic genres all follow the same general pattern. They all evolve, divide, and branch out in different directions over time. If you want to learn about gangster rap, begin with Eazy-E and NWA. If you want to learn about punk rock, begin with Johnny Rotten and the Sex Pistols. If you want to learn about communism, begin with Karl Marx and the Communist Manifesto. In this case, we'll be going back to 1969. The ideology that we're going to inspect thoroughly is normally referred to as feminism by its adherents. But yet, not everyone who identifies as a feminist would agree with this ideology. This worldview is also commonly referred to as the feminist perspective, the feminist analysis, the gender analysis, the feminist lens, the gender lens, etc. It has also been categorized as second wave feminism, third wave feminism, radical feminism, Marxist feminism, women's liberation, etc. This particular perspective has been espoused by many of the most popular and influential feminists, such as Catherine McKinnon, Gloria Steinem, Naomi Wolf, and Anita Sarkeesian, to name a few. The important thing for now is not whether or not you agree with this perspective, and it doesn't really matter what you call it or what you call yourself. At this juncture, your most important task is to understand it, and the Red Stockings Manifesto will make that a lot easier. The Red Stockings Manifesto is a breathtakingly elegant, coherent, comprehensive, and concise document. A meticulous examination of this document will serve our goal of understanding and clarifying this perspective extremely well.